There is a man who has been married for 61 years, and he will tell you without hesitation that 15 of those years were nearly wasted, not because he and his wife stopped loving each other, because they stopped being a team. For 15 years, he and Eleanor kept a list, not on paper, in their heads. Who paid for what? Who gave more? Who was carrying whom? That list nearly ended everything. What he wants you to understand, before anything else, is this. The moment you start keeping score with your partner, you stop building something together. But here's what he also wants you to know. The moment you stop, the moment you tear up the list, something opens up between two people that most couples never get to experience at all. He and Eleanor got 46 years of that, and he says it was worth every difficult conversation it took to get there.
He is 83 years old. He was married to Eleanor for 61 years. She died 4 years ago. And he says not a day passes that he doesn't reach for something to tell her. What he shares in this video is not something he found in a book. It is something he and Eleanor learned the hard way, across 15 years of getting it badly wrong, and then, slowly, getting it right. It is about money. But as he is quick to say, it is not really about money at all. It is about what happens to two people when they forget they are on the same side.
In the early years, he and Eleanor split everything. Rent down the middle, groceries traded off week by week, holidays calculated to the penny so neither of them felt they had paid more than their share. They thought this was fair. They thought fairness was the goal. It is not. Fairness is a fine principle for a contract between strangers, but a marriage is not a contract between strangers. And when you apply the logic of a business transaction to the person you have chosen to build a life with, something quietly corrodes. What corrodes is generosity, the assumption of good faith, the willingness to give without calculating the return. When everything is split, every act of giving becomes an act of accounting. You start to notice who gave more last month. You wonder whether it will balance out, and then you start keeping the list. He and Eleanor kept the list for 15 years, not on paper, in their heads, which is worse, he says, because a list in your head grows without either of you noticing, and by the time you feel the weight of it, it is very heavy indeed. Here is the thing he most wants people to understand about those 15 years. The problem was never the money. The problem was that somewhere along the way, he and Eleanor had started playing against each other. Two people on the same team, both trying to win. And when both people on a team are playing against each other, the team loses, every time.
That is the thing about playing against each other. It rarely announces itself as a war. It announces itself as a list. The mental list builds in silence, not in a single argument or a single moment of grievance, but slowly, the way a slow leak builds, one small, unspoken resentment at a time, until one day the floor is rotten underneath you, and you cannot quite explain when it happened. His looked something like this. He would pay for something, a car repair, an appliance, a holiday deposit, and say nothing about it. But he would notice, and he would store the noticing somewhere just below the surface, where it quietly shaped the tone of every money conversation that followed. The defensiveness, the score settling, the way a simple question about a gas bill could become something neither of them fully understood. Eleanor was running the same list in parallel. Different entries, same weight. They never compared them. That was the problem. Too private spoken aloud. He asks people to sit with something honest when they hear this. Do you have a list? Not out loud, just to yourself. If the answer came quickly, you already know what he means. And if you do have one, he wants you to hear this clearly. Carrying it is not a character flaw. Almost every couple he has ever known has carried one. The only question is whether you are going to keep letting it cost you.
The moment that cracked everything open came from an unexpected direction. Their daughter Margaret was 26. She had come home for a weekend visit,
And at some point on the Saturday evening, she looked across the table at the two of them and asked, very calmly, whether they actually liked each other. Not loved, liked. He and Eleanor both started to answer at the same time, and then they both stopped, because neither of them was entirely sure. They had been so focused on who owed what, who gave more, who was behind in the invisible accounting that ran underneath their marriage, that they had stopped being present with each other. They were roommates. They shared a house and a bank account and a history, but they had stopped sharing a direction. Margaret did not know she had asked the most important question of their marriage. She was simply being honest, the way that grown children sometimes are, without the protective instinct to soften what they see. He and Eleanor sat with that question for a long time after she left, and eventually it became the beginning of something much better.
After Margaret's question, he and Eleanor did something they had never done in 15 years of marriage. They sat down and asked each other what they actually wanted. Not from the money, from the life, not financial goals in the way a bank manager means it. What did they want the days to feel like? What did they want to have done by the time they were old? What were they building together? And what did that require? They wrote it down. It took most of an afternoon, 2 pots of tea, and a fair amount of silence. But at the end of it, they had something they had never had before. A shared picture. One picture, not 2 separate pictures trying to overlap. He calls this the one-pot philosophy. It is not about combining bank accounts, though that is part of it. It is about combining the vision, deciding together what the money is in service of, so that every financial decision has a context larger than the transaction itself. And here is what changed when they had that shared picture. The arguments did not disappear, but they changed shape entirely. Instead of 2 people scoring points against each other, they became 2 people trying to solve the same problem. When Eleanor wanted to spend on something he thought was unnecessary, they had a way to ask together, does this serve the picture we drew? When he wanted to save more aggressively than felt comfortable to her, they had the same question. 2 people, 1 direction. He says those first conversations, the ones where they built the picture together, were some of the most intimate hours of their entire marriage. Not because of what they agreed on, because of what they discovered about each other by asking. 46 years of that followed. 46 years of building something together, on purpose, in the same direction. He says that is what he most wants people to understand. Stopping the list does not just reduce the arguments. It opens up a version of your relationship that the list was blocking the whole time. Once a month, he and Eleanor took what they called the garden walk. Not because they had a grand garden, they had a small one. But the walk was the ritual, not the destination. They moved side by side, and they talked through the money together, not across a table with a spreadsheet between them, but walking, which kept the conversation from becoming a confrontation. The order of the conversation, he says, mattered more than most people would expect. They always started with a win. Not the problems, not the friction. One thing that had felt good financially that month. One thing they had handled well together. It sounds small, but it changes everything about the conversation that follows, because it begins from a posture of partnership rather than problem solving. Then, and only then, they named the friction. He would ask Eleanor whether anything that month had felt unfair, or whether there was something she had noticed and not quite said. She would ask him the same. This was the part most couples resist, because it sounds like an invitation to argue. But he found the opposite to be true. When resentment has a scheduled, structured place to go, it stops leaking into everything else. The couples he has known who fight most about money are almost always the ones who never give the small grievances anywhere to land. They accumulate, they compound. The garden walk gave those things somewhere to go before they could do any real damage. After the friction, they checked the picture. Were they still pointed in the direction they had agreed on?
was anything pulling them off course. This kept the individual decisions connected to the larger vision rather than floating free as isolated arguments. Then they made one decision together, something specific, chosen jointly before the month was out. And they always ended the same way. Each of them asked the other, "What is one thing I can do next month to make this easier for you? Not what do you need, not what did I do wrong. What can I do to make this easier for you?" That question, he says, is the exact opposite of keeping score. It redirects from accounting to generosity, and generosity, once it becomes a habit between two people, tends to grow. They did the garden walk for 45 years. Some months it was easy, some months it was genuinely hard, but they always came out of it on the same side.
Eleanor has been gone 4 years. He would give a great deal to have one more garden walk. Not to fix anything, not to resolve anything, just to be side by side with her, talking about the small and large things, making the next decision together. But when he thinks about what those 46 years actually looked like, the 46 that came after Margaret's question, after the picture was drawn, after the list was torn up, he does not think about the arguments they stopped having. He thinks about what came in through the door when the arguing left. A trip to Portugal they had talked about for a decade and finally took. A cottage they saved for together over 3 years and used every summer until Eleanor could no longer travel. Grandchildren who visited a house where the two people inside it clearly liked each other. None of that was possible when the list was running in the background. The list was not just costing them money, it was costing them the life they could have been building. If you have a partner in the next room right now, someone you share a life and a bank account with, he asks you to do one thing tonight. Find them. Not to have the full conversation, not to solve everything at once. Just ask one question. Ask them, is there anything about how we handle money that you have never quite said out loud? Then stop talking. Listen to the answer. You do not need to resolve it tonight. You just need to hear it. Because what your partner is carrying, the list they have never quite found the right moment to share, is costing you both more than any missed investment or bad financial decision ever could. 61 years is a long time to build something with another person. It goes faster than you think. Start being a team tonight.